Is the filibuster helpful to American government, or should we get rid of it? In November of 2014, a bipartisan bill concerning the Keystone Pipeline went down to defeat 59 to 41. You heard right. It lost despite getting more votes. In the United States Senate, it requires 60 out of the 100 senators for most bills, most legislation to pass. And while there was a time that a filibuster in the Senate meant more than this, today that is really all that it means. Just that legislation needs 3/5, 60 out of 100 of the votes in the Senate. An unusual system, and what are its benefits and downsides? Defenders of the filibuster have several important arguments. None of them are absurd. All are worth taking seriously, although, as you'll see, I'm going to raise some questions about them. But they argue that the filibuster is a protection for the rights of the minority against the tyranny of the majority. Also can prevent overly hasty, not well thought out actions by the legislature. Perhaps most importantly, they argue that in a time like ours, a highly polarized time, it ensures that any bill has to have at least some bipartisan support in order to pass. Although I'll make my own views clear in this video, I hope that no one will feel any pressure to agree with me. All I would ask, as always, is that you carefully consider arguments on both sides and make up your own mind. Before you can make up your own mind, you may need to unlearn some common myths about the filibuster, some of which may even be misunderstood by members of Congress. Because the filibuster has been part of the political landscape for as long as most of us have been alive, many Americans assume that the authors of the Constitution must have carefully planned the filibuster. But that assumption is false. The filibuster is not mentioned in the Constitution, nor did the founders expect that anything other than majority rule would be required in the Senate. Hamilton and Madison, the two primary architects of the Constitution, made their strong opposition to any need for a supermajority, known both in separate Federalist papers as well as in the constitutional debates. I certainly don't think that just because a founding father thought something or said something that we have to accept their word for it. But Hamilton's specific criticisms are worth paying attention to because some of them still seem relevant. After pointing out the obvious but still accurate problem that there could be long delays, Hamilton begins making an argument that flies in the face of what supporters, defenders of filibuster argue. He says that we will actually have more partisanship, more behind-the-scenes conflict than we would with simple majority rule. He points out that while the public may be aware of policies they disliked that were blocked by the filibuster, we may ignore those policies which would have been beneficial, which never passed. Many Americans, growing up and first learning about government, spending our lives in a country like ours where protections against majority rule are built in to the system, may assume that all democracies have these. They don't. Almost all democracies operate under pure majority rule, and the United States is at the extreme end in the degree to which majority opinion does not translate into policy. So the filibuster is unusual. It wasn't planned for by the founders. But there's still a fundamental important question. If the filibuster leads to productive bipartisan compromises, probably a lot of Americans would support it. That's the core argument of modern supporters of the filibuster. The need for 3/5 support in the Senate leads to more bipartisanship and compromises on legislation.
Does it appear that way to you? Do you see any evidence of it? Because I do not. I'd argue that the opposite happens. Senators know that it is virtually impossible to get members of the other party to vote for their bill. So they don't even try to attract bipartisan support. Rather, knowing that no bill is going to pass, they write their bills to appeal to their base as campaign documents to make sure they do not lose primaries.